Hi everyone, I'm Hartford Healthcare's Tina Verona. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We have a great discussion for you. Imagine a pacemaker compatible with your iPhone or your tablet. Bluetooth technology, that's right, and it's right here at Hartford Hospital. Joining me is Dr. Zweibel. He is the Director of Cardiac Electrophysiology of the Hartford Healthcare Heart and Vascular Institute. It is always a pleasure to have you on because you always bring this leading edge technology with you, so thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Sure, so this is quite a feat. I mean, Hartford Hospital is one of a select few across the country to actually be able to offer this to patients. Tell us how this technology works.
Yep, so I think it's important to lay out that we like to do what we call remote monitoring. So we put in a device, a pacemaker or
which
a
we
defibrillator.
have right here.
Yep, so this is an example of the pacemaker that we're implanting now.
And which is incredible in and of itself because these have shrunk over the years.
Considerably, yes. And they've shrunk and they last longer. So the devices only used to last a few years and now these are lasting 12 to 14 years with the new technology. So it's absolutely incredible, especially with what I'm about to tell you about how the device works.
Let's get to it.
So the remote monitoring is where a patient's pacemaker will speak to a monitor. Up till now, it's been a monitor that the patient carries home with them after the procedure, and they plug into an outlet in the wall, and the device and the pacemaker speak to one another, or the monitor and the pacemaker, and then the monitor sends that signal over a cell phone signal to a server, and then my staff can sign on to the server and see that, oh, Mr. Smith's pacemaker is working just fine, or there's an issue. They may be having an arrhythmia or a problem with one of the wires of the device. So that's how we've done it up till now.
And that can only remote monitor from the home, right? So if you're out and about, you don't have that capability.
Or if a patient goes away for a weekend and doesn't bring that monitor with them,
there's no monitoring.
There's no monitoring.
Yep.
And that has been shown to actually improve outcomes for patients. So patients do better. There's data that shows that people who use remote monitoring actually live longer than people who don't, who have pacemakers.
Interesting.
So it's very interesting.
We'll get to that in a minute. And it's almost like having a doctor with you 24/7,
well,
so to speak, right?
Well,
or
sort
somebody
of.
monitoring you?
I think it kind of helps let us know about issues a little bit sooner, certainly. And so what this pacemaker now has in it is a Bluetooth chip. And as we all know, we all have phones. I have my phone right here, and that has a Bluetooth chip in it as well. And what Medtronic has done is they've made an app for the iPhone, soon to be Android device next year. And the device and the patient's phone are linked together, like you would link any phone to a Bluetooth earpiece or something like that. And they communicate with one another. So now, the patient no longer has to carry home a remote monitor and plug it in at their bedside. This is their remote monitor.
Right, and you have the app. Let's just call the app. I know you're probably not going to be able to see it, but just kind of go over what it's very user-friendly. It's really simple to use. Just kind of go over this main menu here, what you would find.
So basically what it does is it tells the patient about how many years they have left in the battery. So it gives it a piece of information for them. You can click on the My Pacemaker function and it will tell you the model number of the pacemaker, the serial number of the pacemaker, and will also give you information about the clinic. So he would give you the Hartford Hospital pacemaker clinic address and a phone number, and you can actually just click and get directions to us or even call us directly from the app. You can also look, for example, at transmission. So the device will tell you the last time I sent a transmission to Dr. Zweibel was 3 weeks ago.
So it keeps a log.
It kind of keeps a log and will let you know. And if for some reason the patient feels they need to send us a transmission off of their schedule, all they need to do is open this and press a button, and that sends us a transmission from their device. The other neat things that it has is, for example, physical activity. So since your pacemaker is with you all the time, kind of like a Fitbit, right? But you can't lose your pacemaker.
Right.
You
It's
can
a
lose
permanent
a Fitbit.
Fitbit.
It's a permanent Fitbit. It can actually track your activity. And so you can go by the day or the week or the month, and it kind of gives a graph of how much activity the patient or the device is recording on the patient. And you know that's pretty accurate because, again, you can't put your pacemaker away in the drawer. It's there.
It's there and it's calculating everything.
All the time. And then there's something here with education, so patients can read about pacemakers. It answers very common questions like, Can I use my pacemaker, a microwave oven when I have a pacemaker?
Right.
Those kinds of questions. And then it also will give you a symptom journal if they want to write in their symptoms. It can also track their vital signs. They can enter in their blood pressure from a blood pressure cuff that they may have at home, or their weight every day, and that will keep that in a journal
and
as
now
well.
you can see all of this, their exercise patterns and everything as well?
So
or
no, we
is
can't. We can just see the pacemaker function and a lot of other things that the patient cannot see at this point.
Yep.
But things like, for example, their blood pressure, if they enter it in, we can't see that right now. That may be something in the future. Their activity level we can see, and we can see that in devices nowadays as well through their remote monitor.
Yeah, and what's great about this technology, this Bluetooth compatibility with the pacemaker, it's almost like, the iPhone. When it first came out, it was the iPhone 3. Now we're up to what, 10?
Yeah.
And look at how far that's come. So you can literally have this same pacemaker, but have these constant updates to it,
Yes,
right?
and I think that's the beautiful thing about this is it's app-based, and that is easily upgradable.
You can easily,
And so, for example, we were talking about this earlier, these devices have what we call an accelerometer in them. So that tells the pacemaker how they're moving, but it also knows the patient's position. Are they standing or are they lying down? And so you could, in theory, I don't know, they're hopefully working on this, that if a patient falls, a pacemaker may be able to detect that. And so if the app detects that the patient has fallen, you could then have this set
Get an
up.
alert.
So, an alert, right?
Yeah.
So a patient's son or daughter may be connected into the app, or a healthcare provider could be notified that the patient has fallen, and so that is again another feature that certainly would not be present in pacemakers prior to this.
What a tremendous benefit. I mean, if you have loved ones that are not living close by, it's almost like a lifeline alert in a sense.
Exactly.
Then it can be.
And at some point, we're hoping that we will actually be able to communicate back to the patient through their app. So if they send a transmission into us, we can take a look. Oh, look, everything is normal, and then we can send the message back to the patient, and they get that on their phone to say, oh, Dr. Zweibel looked at this, everything is normal, and I can relax.
In minutes.
Yes.
It's not like, let me call, try to get an appointment, and that kind of thing. That's great.
And that's great for the patient, and it's also great for our office staff, because we don't have patients calling us all the time. Did my transmission go through? Is everything okay? They get immediate feedback from us once we get the transmission. So it works well for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a game changer, if you will, for sure. We're talking with Dr. Steven Zweibel. He's the Director of Cardiac Electrophysiology here at the Hartford Healthcare Heart and Vascular Institute. Let's talk about programming of the device. And I know that you're a wizard at programming. I've done stories with you in terms of people not having the right programming, or it takes a detective of sorts to really figure that out and to really program these, because it's not easy, but you really have to have a lot of skill and a lot of experience to do that. So kind of take us through the process in terms of how you program these pacemakers.
Sure. So it's important to note that, first of all, the patient's pacemaker will work fine without their phone.
Right.
So if they're linked together and the patient loses their phone, it's not like their pacemaker stops working. It works completely normally. They're really independent of each other. And you can't reprogram, like you're talking about changing the parameters inside the pacemaker. That cannot be done through a patient's mobile device. So this is very safe. All of the data that goes back from the pacemaker to the phone and the phone to us is all encrypted.
All secure.
It's all secure. And so we don't have to worry that someone's going to hack in and change something on the pacemaker. And that's very important, because patients are naturally worried about that. But when we...
the initial programming.
Right, so the initial program. So when we put these devices in, we actually have a programmer. We put it right over the device, or over the skin, over the device, and we can change hundreds of different parameters in the device. We can tell it what's the lowest rate you should go, what's the highest rate you should go, how long should you wait before you pace from the top to the bottom chamber of the heart, and then lots and lots of other more complicated parameters. And like anything in life, sometimes the basic out-of-the-box programming works just fine for some patients, but for some patients it doesn't. And you and I know the patient we're talking about that we did a story on. He had his pacemaker put in New York, and he just was not feeling right.
He was a runner.
He was a runner, and every time he ran, he got to a certain point where he just didn't feel right. And took, as you said, some detective work and getting him on the treadmill, but eventually I figured out what the parameter was that needed to be changed, and the second I did that, he felt great and back to running and felt like $1 million. And so I've been doing this for about 19, 20 years now, and so I'm pretty familiar.
You know a thing or two.
I know a thing or two, and so and that's very helpful.
Right. Of course,
again,
it's the experience.
Again, for the basic patient, usually the standard programming is okay, but I think for people who are even a little bit complicated, you really want to pay attention, and it also helps with the longevity of a device. Many people have a device put in and nobody changes that programming, and here at Hartford, when they come back in, we actually aggressively change their programming to allow the device to last as long as possible. And so as I had said before, devices usually only lasted maybe 5 to 7 years, 7 to 10 years, and now this pacemaker is lasting 12 to 14 years, those are the estimates on.
Did you ever think you would see that, a pacemaker lasting this long?
Well, I was hoping.
Right.
I was hoping. It's a constant back and forth between the physicians and the companies like Medtronic who make these devices. Getting your feedback
to them and them going
and saying
to
work this is what we would like.
Right.
And at some point, the technology catches up. At some point, they could say, well, if you want a pacemaker that's this big, it can last for 20 years. But without a pacemaker that big, who wants that?
Right.
And so, but they've worked very diligently, and battery technology and circuitry and all that have progressed to the point where now the batteries can actually get a little smaller, but they last longer. Yeah.
Is there who is a candidate for this? Is it pretty much everybody, or are there certain guidelines, or is there a certain patient criteria that fits this?
So certainly for any pacemaker, if you have a slow heart rhythm that you're symptomatic from, that's not reversible, then you're a candidate for a pacemaker. And clearly you need to have consultation with a cardiologist, potentially an electrophysiologist such as myself, to figure out if you're a candidate. Once we determine you're a candidate for a device, then anybody would be a candidate for this particular device with the Bluetooth technology. And it's not limited, like I spoke about that wireless micro pacemaker. That was limited to a small percentage, maybe 10-15% of patients who need a pacemaker. This is not. So we have this now in single and dual chamber formats for 1 lead or 2 leads, and also for 3 leads. And so, and then probably within the next few years, this Bluetooth technology will also move into their ICD or defibrillator platforms. I was going to ask you about the defibrillators. Yeah. So the defibrillators are used for patients who have dangerous heart rhythms or at risk for having dangerous heart rhythms and for sudden cardiac death. Those devices have the potential to save people's lives.
Sure.
And so those devices eventually will move into this, what Medtronic calls their BlueSync platform, which is the Bluetooth technology with an app. And I can imagine that for that, the app will be potentially even more helpful for patients, even with ICDs as well.
Yeah, it's unbelievable, the technology. Let's talk about the study that you've been involved with, and you've been involved with various studies over the years with Medtronic, but tell us about this particular study. We're one of a few in the country that is participating in this and that can offer this, so tell us about that.
Yeah, so basically what Medtronic wanted to figure out is who's going to be using this technology, who's going to be afraid of it, who has an iPhone, and who doesn't. And after that, when we finally get the device in and we get the app and the person has it, is this going to improve the reliability of communicating with the pacemaker? So as you said, if a patient goes away and isn't near their box, or they unplug the box at home, we don't get any remote transmissions. And so a good chunk of my clinic's time is calling people on the phone and saying, you know what, we haven't received your remote transmission and you really should send it. And as I said, that improves patients' outcomes. So our goal is to have 100% of our patients 100% compliant with remote monitoring. And so we hope, and that's what this study will show, is that patients who actually have the iPhone app linked to their pacemaker will be more reliable in these transmissions.
Absolutely. But I think it's also important too, like having a loved one being on there too. If you're not so, savvy with your iPhone, or maybe your any kind of a tablet or anything, you have a family member that can monitor that too and see it and communicate.
You can, and so the way it's developed now is that you can invite up to 4 people to participate, and so they can have the app on their phone. So if you have a son, a daughter, a husband, whatever, they can have it on their phone, and they can see, I believe, the same information that the patient can see on their phone. And so that is certainly helpful. And we remember we mentioned we showed the activity on the app. And so you can imagine that if your mother is in Florida and you're in Connecticut and you have this app, you can see, mom is really active, and then all of a sudden mom is not so active for a day or two. That may prompt you to pick up the phone and say, hey mom, I noticed via your pacemaker that you're not very active.
That you wouldn't have otherwise known that.
You might not have otherwise known
I mean,
that.
it's just such peace of mind, and that you can't replace that. So that is huge. Where do you see this going from here? Because it's almost like, how do you get any better than this?
Yeah, well, again, the initial iPhone, as you said, you had that. Boy, how could this get any better? And now we have the iPhone 10. So there will be iterations of this software. And again, I'm not involved in the development of it at this point, but we spoke about the fall. You know, if a patient falls, you can imagine that this may link into blood pressure monitors and other data and provide that back to us, and maybe even push it into our electronic medical records so your physician has access to it. And again, the sky's almost the limit here with how this can be used.
And it's really changing the delivery of healthcare if you look at it. And so I really think that to sort of sum this all up is that, you know, we're really on the leading edge of transforming healthcare, but that delivery of care, it's totally different now.
And it will be totally different even 5 years from now. And we're working on innovative technology where we're going to be providing a lot of care from home through telemedicine to telehealth. And where I'm working on a project now with pacemaker patients where we would potentially providing some care from home. They don't even need to come into the office necessarily. And so, and that's honestly, that's the way that I would want to be cared for if it were safe and if I didn't have to take a day off of work to come in to see my doctor. I could just do it from my phone, from the office.
In minutes, in a matter of minutes and in real time.
Yes.
It doesn't get much better than that. Dr. Zweibel, thank you so much. We're going to have you back because I know you're always on the leading edge of new technology and the latest innovations that are out there. So thank you for sharing your time with us.
My pleasure.
And of course, thank you for spending a little bit of your evening with us. I'm Hartford Healthcare's Tina Verona. We'll see you next time.